Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nintendo Pipeline Podcast, brought to you by Nintendo Era. I'm your host, Mina, and joining me today is...
One Up Muffin, but you can call me Jared.
And
I'm CMM, but you can call me Clay, or whatever you feel like.
And we have a very special guest today. Why don't you introduce yourself? Let's give your username first, and then what we can call
Hi
you.
there. I'm Splendor in the Discord, but you can just call me Will.
Cool. So, thank you for joining us, Will.
Sure.
I roped you in on a podcast that I know two things that are very near and dear to your heart. Maybe not for the same reasons, but we're talking about Dragon Quest and Sonic today. Why these two wildly different franchises? Well,
Because they both have blue-haired characters.
yeah, that's probably
exactly
why. Yeah,
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Nailed it in one.
But also, coincidentally, they both did an event last week, as of this recording. I guess it'll be last week when this goes up too. But yeah, so they both did events this week, last week. One of them was like a live, like legit, like live presentation. The other one was more of a direct style, right?
Sure.
And we can get into that, and we can get into how we liked the conferences overall and all that. But let's go one by one. So let's just start with Dragon Quest. They went first. And
Yep.
probably the more substantial of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The wording is nice when you say it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know. So, Dragon Quest, we got a live event. It was for the first time in Dragon Quest history, actually. We got this live broadcast for an unveil that was simultaneously dubbing it in English. That's never happened before. These are usually Japanese-only streams. They made sure to make it in a somewhat American-friendly night. It was time. It was like late in the evening, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, it was nice. Clearly, I think they were clearly indicating ahead of time, kind of what their idea for the stream was, right? So let's get into it. Let's just get into the announcements. And I want to start with the biggest one, because I think this is the one that we saw the most of. It is just the most exciting by itself. It's just all around great announcement. And that's Dragon Quest 3 HD.
Not the match 3 game?
Not the Match 3 game! I know some people out there are really excited for that one, but unfortunately no. So Dragon Quest 3. Now, if you don't know, Dragon Quest 3 is one of the most beloved Dragon Quest games in Japan, right? And specifically, though, this remake is running on the HD 2D engine, Square Enix's famed engine that they have Octopath Traveler on, and the Octopath Traveler is what introduced us to this style, and then the upcoming Project Triangle Strategy is using it as well. And now we're seeing them branch out with it, which is a lot of fun. What's your gut reaction to seeing this trailer?
Pretty. So pretty.
Yeah,
oh
it's
my,
very
it's
pretty.
very pretty. Best scenario.
It's a literal dream game, right? And insofar as like when you pitch it to someone, right? I think in America the first time we see HD 2D, your brain goes to Final Fantasy VI, right? That's the one that gets brought up all the time. Why don't you remake it in this style?
Without
right?
a doubt.
I think that number 2, if you polled the world, would be Dragon Quest 3 for this game.
Yeah, I would bet in Japan this would be above FF6, right?
Yes,
In terms of
100%.
what they want to see from this engine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a very cool trailer, because Dragon Quest 3 has an interesting thing where there's a Famicom, then a Super Famicom version, right? And they sort of show that. And I think the Super Famicom version still looks very nice, right?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But then like they just go and it's the same scene, but just like part 1, part 2, part 3, and then that realization of just like, oh man, they're doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Super cool.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is kind of what we wanted from this engine, right? Obviously, we love new games. We love to see Octopath, and but there's so much potential to revisit these old classics, right? Because this is just, I mean, these games really come to life in a gorgeous way with this engine, right?
I think this is the absolute best way to bring back retro RPG style games, like making them modern but also keep the wonderful sprite work. All comes together really well.
Yeah, because you know this allows them to do sprite stuff, but still make it seem like a big deal, right? And not like a budget thing, right?
Yeah.
Not like those weird mobile ones that look kind of like Flash game-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like when they do the kind of like, I hate to bring it up, but the Secret of Mana remake where it's like this half measure where it's like they didn't go all in, they didn't go like not in. It just kind of doesn't satisfy anybody.
Right. It's
Well,
just kind of the worst of both worlds, right? With that
because
Secret Mana.
it's that thing where like at the time these things were cutting edge visually, right?
Yeah.
Like they were going for big, right?
For sure.
And so when you have these remakes that do feel like half steps, that's almost the betrayal in my mind, right?
Yeah.
That like you're not acknowledging the ambition of these original titles.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which this game seemingly is, right? Like that, Dragon Quest III is still in many ways the house that JRPGs are built on.
Yeah.
And so for it to have that kind of, pomp and circumstance to a remake, right? This is obviously very different than like a FF7 remake, right? Which is
for sure.
essentially a
Right.
new game. This one's very faithful, but in a way that like I haven't seen a single person complain about, right? Which
Yeah.
I like FF7 remake, but that does not apply to that game, Like
No. Like that's just a very different experience. And while this one, like this just is like the best way to modernize a Super Nintendo RPG, right? Like truly, like I cannot think of a better way to go about it. I also think like just visually, I mean, obviously inherently this art style is gorgeous, right? But this might be my favorite implementation yet because, you can. I mean, Dragon Quest III is a very colorful game, right? And I think that really shows in this, and I think because I don't want to call Octopath drab, but there is a more what's the word I'm looking for?
the color palette is like toned down.
It's
The saturation is not as
Yeah,
high.
right. Whereas Dragon Quest is a lot more saturated, and in this art style, that just looks really good. It just looks really good.
I love
Well,
how bright
yeah.
Dragon Quest is, and this does it well.
Yeah.
Which we can maybe talk about whether or not it will be bright after in a little bit. But I think that like when you're in a world where like especially the monsters, right? I think Dragon Quest just really hangs its hat on its monsters, right? They have a whole series about them.
Yeah.
They are all so colorful and goofy that like to see them sort of realized, because we've seen them realized in a very great way in 11, I think, right? They look very, very good.
Yeah.
But to see them also realized in a sort of sprite aesthetic still also has a lot of charm to it.
Without a doubt. Now, so yeah, are you guys hoping for any other kind of remake? Obviously FF6 is the big one, but does this spark any ideas in you of like, oh, I gotta have this?
I can give you one right off the bat. Someone else mentioned this to me. Super Mario RPG.
Ooh, that'd be a great one.
Because this is already kind of isometric, right? This is not top down.
Yeah.
And Mario RPG is extremely that. So that could be very interesting.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
And it's a Square game, so
That would be a great collaboration.
Announce it with Gino and Smash just to really just throw all the internet stuff at the wall.
Oh, baby.
I think it's worth mentioning. I think it's very funny. They did a bit about this in the live stream. Uchi Hori runs his mouth. He just does. If you're not a longtime fan of Dragon Quest, like you may remember as a Switch fan that Dragon Quest got announced for NX really early. That was not intended. That was just Hori running his mouth in an interview. A year and a half early, basically. So he basically said, he's like, yeah, if this does okay, we're going to do 1 and 2. And then they were like, hold on.
They blew a whistle.
Blew the whistle.
They had a whole bit in the stream where if Hori was saying things he wasn't supposed to, they had a horn where they'd be like, shut up, shut up, shut up.
Which was very
Also,
charming.
I guess it should be mentioned, this is a Nintendo podcast, so we're covering things that normally we'd cover things that are coming to Switch, right? And that is the intention here, but there was no platforms announced, right?
For any of this.
For anything besides the mobile games. And so we're just kind of operating on the assumption that I think all of these games have a pretty good chance of coming to Switch, especially Dragon Quest 3, right?
I can't
Because,
imagine 3 not coming.
Yeah, the other HT2D games are on Switch. Dragon Quest in particular has a lot of goddamn games on the Switch already, right?
Yep. Including versions of Dragon Quest 1 through 3. I think they're based on the mobile ones.
Yeah, it has a port. And I almost bought Dragon Quest 3 multiple times, by the way. So
Good you waited.
glad I held off because oof.
And Dragon Quest is a series because sometimes games don't come to Switch, and you're like, did Nintendo try? If Dragon Quest doesn't come to Switch, it is purely on the back of Square Enix, right? Just being morons. Like,
Oh yeah.
11 got like multiple direct showcases that opened their fucking E3 direct. Can we swear? Sorry if we can't swear.
You can say.
And so yeah, I have to. It is fiscal irresponsibility if any of these games don't come to Switch. You know, like it would just be very stupid.
Doesn't
Yeah.
make
Dragon
any
Quest
sense.
character
Yeah.
in Smash.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. And
I
like,
mean that
here's the
didn't
thing.
stop Atlas, to be clear, but
Like, and as much as I appreciate the global push, I mean, Dragon Quest is still always going to be biggest in Japan, right?
Yeah.
And Switch is just way too. I mean, it's too big worldwide. Let's be honest, right? It's not like I'm like, but and so the Switch has the biggest user base, but also specifically in Japan. If you're ignoring Switch, come on, what are you doing, right? But anyway, I guess while we're on that subject, let's just move on to it. So this is the game I think most people are assuming the rest will come to Switch. This is the big one though. That is the big question mark, right? Technically, the biggest announcement of the show, I think most of us would argue it wasn't really because we didn't really get much of note of it, right? Much detail, but they
it was
did
the
announce.
reason. It was the reason we showed up, but it was not the reason we left.
Yeah,
you know, like
pretty much.
it was that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
But so yeah, they announced Dragon Quest 12, the next mainline entry of the Dragon Quest series. We got a logo. I think that logo does a pretty good job of telling us where they're going. I guess they mentioned specifically that they want this to be Dragon Quest for adults.
Oh god.
Yeah.
And so, what that means... So we got some vague details on this game, right?
Sure.
Very vague details. That would include... This is going for a more darker theme than previous games, right? The combat system is changing somewhat. We don't know in full extent. They still call it the command system, which is what they call their battle system, right?
Yeah.
But they did say that it's not going to... You know, they're going to be changing it somewhat, right? But again, we don't know. We didn't see screenshots. We didn't see nothing. We saw a logo. We literally.
We
saw
know
a
the
logo.
subtitle,
Yeah, we know the
Yeah.
subtitle.
Flames of Fate, which does that mean anything to you? Congratulations.
I mean, the logo has flames, so you know that's
Yeah.
something.
Also
and
true.
you know, I think there was a clock. You know, it was 12:12. You know, I mean, 12 like o'clock. You know, so you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fate is associated with tie. I don't know.
They didn't really. They
I
didn't give us
respect
too
a lot
much.
what you're going for
Yeah.
here.
So in
Yeah.
terms of darkness, I would be okay with like a darker story tone, but like the bright colors are what make Dragon Quest. So if it's dark and grim, like a Dragon's Dogma like type color palette, that would be disappointing.
Yeah, I find, I mean, I'm like most people know that I'm not really into RPGs or JRPGs or anything like that. In fact, I kind of despise them. But in terms of Dragon Quest and like its characters and stuff, the thing that I find appealing about them is that, you know, they are very light and colorful and like, I don't know, they're very likable.
Yeah.
So I hope they don't go too far in the direction where like, you know, everything is, you know, muted and, you know, sad or angry now.
Yeah, I mean, we
So go ahead.
we spent a lot of the 360 and Xbox and PS3 generation seeing a lot of Japanese developers chase this dragon, right? And so I think that there's war flashbacks to that, right? Of like, are they going to Bomberman Act Zero Dragon Quest, right? And I have a little bit more faith in them than that.
Yeah.
But a thing that specifically I really like about Dragon Quest is dark. And that's the thing that people don't know about that game when you play it, right? And like itself is very cheery, but there will be portions of that game that are deeply sad, right? And I think the reason that stuff like that works is the same reason that people like cry at the beginning of Up, right? Is like there is something about things that are tragic with a bright color palette that makes them feel almost even more sad when they do happen.
Yeah, it's like that contrast.
Yeah, and so when sort of you take away that from the game, right, and you also take away that inherent charm that, like a CMM said, right, if he could possibly bring it within himself to like a JRPG, it would be because of that.
Yeah.
So there are worries there, obviously.
So let's just go in. let's just address the worst case scenario that's kind of going around, right? And that is that this is a grimdark game targeted to the West, PS5 only. Now I don't think that's particularly likely.
No.
Yeah.
To be honest, I really kind of think that I think people are overselling what they're saying. I know I know they have big words, right? But and maybe and take this as you will, but I cannot see it straying too much from the Dragon Quest formula. Like, no matter what their intentions are, like I don't think that they are that dumb, because it should be noted, right? Yes, Dragon Quest is niche outside of Japan. That's just a fact, right? It is still easily outside of Nintendo. Let's count Nintendo published games out of the equation. It is the second biggest JRPG franchise after Final Fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Even if you could say, they don't do they barely sell 1 million, if that, outside Japan. It doesn't matter if you're still the second biggest JRPG, right?
Yeah.
Even if it was across 3 versions, Dragon Quest XI sold 6 million copies. That is nothing to sneeze at.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And so I don't think Square Enix is willingly going to,
Cast
burn
that aside.
Just toss aside their Japanese fan base to try to make it like a Monster Hunter World situation. Like, I don't see that happening. I also don't think a Monster Hunter World, I don't think that's reasonable to aspire to for JRPGs, for single player JRPGs,
Yeah, they're very different types of games, and for the record, I also don't believe that the changes will be as drastic as they made it sound. At all. I'm sure there'll be some degree of change, but not to the level that some people are scared of.
Yeah. I forgot to.
Second. What if it's still bright and colorful?
Okay.
But now there's some blood, and the main character says "fuck."
Okay.
And that's it.
So
I mean,
Shadow
that's
the
my
Hedgehog.
favorite. That's my favorite video game ever made. Yeah. I mean, Shadow the Hedgehog is my current favorite video game ever made, so this might pass that.
Yeah, this might pass that. Yeah, true.
Well, I think the thing about Dragon Quest is it's very rare for a series that's had its 35th anniversary to have a lot of people at the top of that, for better or for worse, right? Referring to the composer, a very consistent team, right? They have not swapped a lot over 35 years. And what this led to is a very, very consistent series. And I think that there's not a lot besides words right now to make me think that would not continue after 35 years, right? Yeah. Like, Final Fantasy has higher highs and lower lows, depending on who you ask. But Dragon Quest is just constantly going at its own pace, right? So that's another place where I would sort of pour water on maybe the flames of fate that people are worried about,
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about kind of the other Dragon Quest stuff that happened. We're not going to spend as much time on them, but we did get a couple smaller announcements. One of them is Dragon Quest Treasures, right?
Yes.
Sure thing.
So, action RPG.
This is an action RPG. I would say very reminiscent of Dragon Quest Monsters, right? Made by the Monsters team, by the way. I guess there's a reason for that.
It also stars Eric from 11, who also is supposed to be starring in a Monsters game.
Yes.
So just plenty of reason for you to be confused in the first 30 seconds of that trailer.
And they confirm that Monsters game is still coming.
That's a separate project.
Yeah.
Yes. I think when we first saw this trailer, we thought, oh, this is the Monsters game they're talking. No, it's not. Right. So like Will said, this is starring Eric from Dragon Quest 11. It has a very Monsters aesthetic. It looks cool. What do you guys kind of think about this one?
I think Dragon Quest spin-offs are always interesting, and they're good, right? Like they have dedicated teams to spin-offs in a way that I think is very healthy, right? Almost Mario-like. And so, this trailer, it's not going to knock your socks off, right? But I think that very rarely are these things not solid, and I think that's sort of the impression that I got walking out of it.
Yeah, I think it's again not really into these types of games. If there's any game from this that they've shown that I'd be willing to try, it would probably be this one. I think it's just it looks neat. It does look kind of similar, kind of like I don't know. I don't I'm not super familiar with like monsters and like builders and stuff, but it kind of to the untrained eye, it kind of just looked like somewhere in between those two.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, like it even had
Uh,
like Builders 2 had a glider, right, as well, right? And I think
Oh, did it? That's
Dragon
funny.
Quest of the Wild. It was
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yes.
That must be really far into the game because I feel like I played like 5 hours of that and I've not gotten a glider.
Yeah,
I can
you
see
don't
this
get it till like
remembering.
the second island. No, you get it on like the second island.
Oh,
so
okay,
it's like
yeah.
a quarter
So
of the way
it
through
does,
the game.
It takes a while, but
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a fun game. It's a good slow burn.
More Breath of the Wild influence, you know. It'll be interesting to see this one more. But I this was more of a teaser, I guess I would say, right? Even though it was real footage, but didn't see much.
Yeah, I didn't get a good
sure.
idea of what it was going to be, but I'm interested.
For sure.
Yeah, I
for sure.
appreciated that it was like gameplay footage that they showed. Though.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Right. Not just a logo, not just a concept or whatever. Yeah. And then one other quick thing they had, but so I guess to run through the other things that we're not going to talk about, they had a Dragon Quest mobile game, sure, whatever.
Yep.
And then they had Dragon Quest 10 expansion, right, version 3.0 or something, right?
I think it's 6. I want to say
or-
it's 6.
Oh, sure, it's probably 6. That actually makes more sense. I'm thinking of Monster Hunter.
Oh yeah.
So, but Dragon Quest X, speaking of, did bring us something interesting. So the two Dragon Quest X products are the only ones not announced for the West. I think we can affirmatively say Dragon Quest X, the MMO, is never coming to the West. Just
Yeah,
Yeah.
let
And
it
that's
go.
the way they
That's
phrased
the-
it.
Yeah, that's
No,
the one they specified has no Western release
No
plans.
Western plan. Sorry. So the other one though, Dragon Quest. So they are making an offline version of Dragon Quest X. Now again, this has not been announced for the West yet, but they did not. Unlike the other one, they didn't specify. So this makes me think this is coming over. And
Yeah.
in the past, Yuji Horii has said we'd love to do an offline version of Dragon Quest X, specifically to release it in the West. Yuji Horii loves to run his mouth, as we established. So
Yep.
He did this 2 years ago when he said that. Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that this is gonna come. But
Yeah.
again, they haven't announced it, so don't.
They said one thing. They said, and I could be misquoting this, but they said the Japanese release. They specifically said the Japanese
Yeah.
release was planned for late 2022.
Now,
Yeah.
if I were to take a guess why, it's because I imagine all these other games are being translated in tandem with the Japanese release.
Yeah.
Where for 10, the script exists in Japanese where it doesn't exist in English. So it probably adds on time.
Yeah, the
more
localization just naturally will take longer because of
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So this is a cool product though. Visually, it looks kind of weird. I'm not
Yeah.
like it's a chibi style. I guess what they're going for is like a DS style.
It reminded me of Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition.
There is a little bit of that to it, yeah.
Nothing is quite that bad though. I
It
want to.
reminded me a little bit. Well, not a little bit. It reminded me a lot of bit of Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl in terms
Ooh,
of the,
yeah.
in terms of the visual approach. So that's kind of interesting.
I
Conceptually,
mean,
know-
hey, this is the one Dragon Quest game to never come
Yeah.
outside of Japan, right?
Yep.
And even for Japanese fans, I imagine not everyone is into the idea of playing an MMO, right?
Yep.
And so I like the idea of turning an MMO into a single player game.
I think it's exciting.
Yeah,
I think this is a
really-
fascinating idea.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
because also it's a very interesting question of how do you adapt this story? Because obviously MMO is designed purely for multiplayer, right? This is
Yeah.
and this is the exact opposite. And I think that's a very obviously with like Dragon Quest 11, they are not averse to the idea of just making two completely different versions of a game that have the same narrative, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is sort of a continuation of that idea almost, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, I've been kind of hoping that they would do an offline version of this game, mostly because, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are super into Dragon Quest, and they would love to play 10 in some form, but obviously cannot. So I'm curious to see how it turns out, what they do. Something I'm wondering is, it's not like the online version of Dragon Quest X is finished by any means. Like they just announced a new version, so I don't know if they're like going to include like everything
Updates.
narrative wise through version 6. I don't know if they're maybe thinking about like ending content development for 10 at some point. Like I just don't know. I'm just curious how you make an offline version of like an offline version of a live service game that's still going. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, that'll be interesting. Like, I wonder, like, I imagine at least as of now they plan on adapting all the content that there is up to version 6, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And so maybe that comes in the form of DLC. Maybe version 6 is it. Who knows, right? I mean, I would doubt that part. I don't think I don't think that they're just letting go of their active subscriber base. Right?
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Because the thing I'd be very curious about is, Mina, you can speak more to this, but like for Final Fantasy 14, right? I know that the pitch of Endwalker is this is the end of the current like arc saga, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if there was a Japanese person or someone that played 10 that could say, oh, there's like a logical endpoint to the narrative where you could feel like that's a game, and then like sort of whatever comes after is a whole separate story.
Yeah, you could technically do a Dragon Quest 10-2 or whatever.
Dragon Quest 10-2 is so funny.
Offline.
Oh.
Hey, I mean,
bring back dress spheres, cowards.
Final Fantasy X did it as well. Same number probably means something, right? Yeah. All right. Well, that was kind of the Dragon Quest event. Overall, what are your kind of thoughts on this whole presentation?
It was fun. I thought it was classy. I felt horrible for the live translators who were, clearly just. I mean, they did great, but like, holy crap, that was. It was sort of like one of those things that you like watch and listen to, and like it kind of sucks your own energy out along with theirs because you're like, what's going on?
And the two guys were being so conversational.
Yeah,
that it was just so hard for a translator to keep up with it.
A single translator to do that. People should. Okay, so here's the thing: Nintendo presentations, right? When they have Japanese people talking. They assign one person to each person that shows up on stage.
They really do that.
I don't know how this is not. I mean, the answer is they don't want to pay more people to work at 11 p.m. But I don't know. Like, I feel like that should be a baseline at this point, right? A, for the poor translator, and B, for us at home, Like,
if you're too worried about Dragon Quest becoming too Western focused, just remember that fact, and you can not have to worry at all.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
I also want to briefly mention the set for the main presentation was very pretty and intricate.
Oh, yeah.
With the books and everything, and like the different announcements, they had like kind of different sections of the stage that like referenced each of them. And
I really loved for the mobile game where the producer was like, look for the erasers, where could they be hidden? And then it cuts back to the the presenter, and it's like right in front of him on the table. He's like,
yeah,
I found it. It was not that hard, actually.
I was looking like in the background, like, are they going to be on the shelves? And it's just, oh, never mind.
Right there. Made me laugh.
I've only played a few Dragon Quests, but I really like that presentation, and it definitely made me interested in Dragon Quest 3.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least most of us walked away at least wanting some sort of something, right? And that's always a good sign.
Yeah, and I thought that they did a good job at just keeping it keeping it on the ball with the announcements. Like, it didn't feel like they wasted much time.
Nothing overstayed its welcome, right? And I think a testament to that is when the mobile game showed up. Like, we were not like, oh my god, like it didn't feel that long. I felt like we got it over.
In the moment, you're a whiny baby, but after that was fine.
Then it's over, and then it's the rest of it, and it was fine. So
and they made a very smart decision. That it was actually an hour and a half presentation, but the first hour was everything that's just Japan, right? Your merch, all your other stuff that didn't have any translation on it, right?
Yeah.
And then the main event was when they said Western people show up.
Yeah, that was
cute
definitely
too.
Smart.
The little news show, I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
I watched it anyway because what else am I going to do at
Yeah,
that
why
time?
not,
But...
right?
But yeah, we do have another.
Yes, we do. We have another presentation. It happened the next morning, right?
Yep.
And this one was about our good friend Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yes.
So this was called Sonic Central. Now this one was more direct style, right?
Yep.
Here's a pre-recorded presentation. We're showing you thing after thing after thing, right? It was a direct. It was a direct for Sonic in a lot of ways. Now this was much shorter, 13 minutes maybe, right?
Yep.
And they really did not spend much time on any of these things, right?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of just kept going and going and going and
It
going.
was 12 minutes, and it somehow felt both longer and shorter than the Dragon Quest presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good summation of it, honestly. So let's go through the announcements. So it's worth noting because this is Sonic. All these are coming to Switch. That makes sense. They're all multi-platform. It's Sonic. You should not expect otherwise, right?
Yeah.
But unlike Dragon Quest, they were explicitly announced. So yeah, that's worth mentioning. The first thing they showed was Sonic Colors. That's coming September, 3 months from now. It's $40. The physical version comes with like little goodies, right? Like little keychain of some sort, right?
For the second Sonic movie.
Yeah, they're like leftover promo items from the Sonic
from the Sonic movie, which is that's fun. So was that a Japan only thing at first? The those little keychains, or was that everywhere?
I honestly don't know. I just know I've seen it somewhere.
Because I was talking to someone on the phone about this, and they were telling me like that it was from it was specifically like a promotion for Japan, and I guess
Can I interrupt?
So
I think it's funny because like Sonic Colors, the original release, the pre-order bonus was those extra Sonic hats that they had.
Yeah. I have one.
It's a
I have one. Yeah.
But I want to briefly run it back and say, you discussing Sonic pre-order incentives with someone on the phone is a very funny visual.
You know,
Yeah.
they brought it up. They're like, "Hey, you hear about that Sonic game?" I was like, "Yeah, I did." Actually, I lied. I feigned ignorance. I was like, "What? New Sonic game?"
Wow.
I can't show my power levels.
Oh,
about Sonic.
can I have a brief aside? Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
A tragedy struck my friend this week when I was speaking of, where you know how there's always the Twitter classic, they always get shared in the Discord. If you could bring back some of these franchises, which one would you? Right? And there was that one that was a D7, which two, right? And apparently a game of telephone happened where a friend went to work the next day and said, "Hey man, you hear they're making a new Excite bike?"
Oh no.
And he was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And he goes, "Nintendo did a poll, and whichever two games won the poll, they're getting a new game." And then and Excite Bike won, so we're getting a new Excite Bike. And my friend had to be like, "Buddy, I hate to break your heart, but that was just some dumbass on Twitter."
Yeah, that was just somebody
they
on
weren't a
Twitter having fun.
But I thought, man, that's Leak Zone. That's that right there, right? That's just miscommunication.
I gotta love how misinformation happens. But not on this
sorry.
podcast. We only give you hard, cold facts.
Only the truth.
Yeah.
And speaking of hard cold facts, so they showed Sonic Colors Ultimate. They showed the pre-order bonus. There's like some player icons and stuff. Mm-hmm. But what I found amusing, and not in a good way, is there's a bunch of extra stuff that's being added to Sonic Colors Ultimate that they did not talk about.
They did not talk about. Yeah, I wanted to touch on that. So we know there's some sort of Metal Sonic element, right?
Yeah. So it's called the Rival Rush, and you race against Metal Sonic, and you earn some kind of rewards. They haven't really specified what, but yeah.
And there's some sort of so we know there's player icons, right? I don't know if that's indicating some sort of online element, right?
Yeah. I have to imagine so. There's leaderboards or something, right?
Yeah, and there was a thing on the PS5 listing of the game on PSN was like, oh, you need PlayStation Plus to play online or whatever.
Okay.
So I don't know if maybe the Game Land feature from the original game, because that was multiplayer in the original game locally. Maybe that
interesting.
is online.
So maybe they that. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious because it's interesting that you list the PlayStation version saying that because PlayStation, unlike Nintendo, PlayStation does not lock behind like leaderboards and stuff like that behind the online subscription. So
Yeah.
so whatever it is that they're locking behind has to be some sort of playable element, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool. I didn't know that. That's interesting. What do you guys think about Remix on Colors though?
I think it's cool. That was only on the Wii before, so
Yes,
this is the first
it
time
is.
that other platforms can play it.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people wanted a PC port for a long time, or at least some wanted to play it. And this is the first time it's finally escaping the Wii. So that's exciting.
Yeah. I genuinely really enjoyed that game. You know, it's not like, you know, it's not some like amazing masterpiece, but like it's a very solid, fun game, and it looks like they're adding more content to it than I would have expected them to.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
And the price point's good.
Yeah.
Like 40 is pretty reasonable.
And the visuals and theming of that game is fantastic.
Yeah.
I feel a little bad because it got leaked to hell and back, right? Like, it just got listed a bunch. But that's where I feel like showing off that new stuff would have really helped a lot. You know?
Yeah, and then so for them to just kind of announce it, and like it's not like they don't have it ready because the game's out in 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's kind of what made this presentation so weird to me. Like it was just paced in the strangest way, you know. And like especially like finding out information through Twitter afterwards. It's like it was weird.
Yeah, and like their PR as well is where we found out the rival rush mode with Metal Sonic. Like.
Just
It's weird.
strange way to present these games. But I'm excited for. I liked Colors a lot on the Wii, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, it's no master. It's not a Mario game, right? It's not on that level. But it is a very genuinely fun platformer. In my opinion, the best like kind of iteration of modern Sonic, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll preface it with, I think it's personally my favorite of the quote unquote boost games.
Even more than Generations?
Yeah, Generations, so I'll touch on this very briefly, but Generations hits all kind of hot and cold for me. Very inconsistent, and I'm honestly not that wild about it. Colors I enjoy much more in terms of just an overall,
It felt more consistent to me, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, though, I think Generations is still a fun game. I like it a lot, too, right? But this is definitely my favorite iteration of modern Sonic.
I have to try. I should try Colors again. I've only played a few levels at a friend's house.
Hey, now there's the perfect opportunity.
Yeah,
right?
maybe.
I also think it like hits the right tone for Sonic, right? Which maybe is, I mean, maybe who cares about that, right? But there's a culture war going on with what Sonic the Hedgehog should be at this point. But I think that like that's the right balance of like goofy fun, right? And then like a couple of moments that were like neat, you know, like in terms of both like things you were doing in the game, right, and like environments you were running through. So
right.
I mean, genuinely, this is also like and I feel really dumb talking about this, okay? But this is kind of like my ideal story for a Sonic game, you know? I know it's silly to talk about story in Sonic, of all things, right? But I think it just hits the right tone. Like, it's fun, it's not overly serious, right?
Can I throw a word out there?
Mm-hmm.
It's got the right vibe.
It's got the right vibe. It really does.
Got the vibe.
Especially with the theme park setting, you know. It's just a lot of fun. Eggman, the characterization of Eggman is just fantastic in Colors.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can hear him this time.
Yeah, I was gonna say I hope they fix the audio balancing so I can actually hear him this time.
That'd be nice. So let's get into the other announcements.
Yes.
I think the next big thing is what is it called again? Sorry, I didn't write this down.
Sonic Origins.
Sonic Origins. So this is a collection of Sonic 1, 2, CD, and for the first time in a long time, 3 and Knuckles. Right?
Yeah.
Already it's notable for that. But these are widescreen versions of the game. We have not, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you guys would know more than me, but this is the first time widescreen Sonic is showing up outside of mobile? Is this true?
I believe so in terms of those games, because the M2 versions of those games, and I believe the Genesis collection versions of those games are all 4x3.
4x3, yeah. And
Sonic 3 has never been in widescreen.
And Sonic 3 has just never been, period, even on mobile, right?
And so there was some confusion in regards to if Sonic 3 and Knuckles would in fact be in widescreen or in 4x3, but there was a tweet that I saw, and I wish I could remember who they were, but
yeah, it was. I remember who it was. It was Katie Kronowski. I forget. I think she's at Mini Kitty. I don't know if she still is. I knew her a long time ago. Anyway, she said she works for Sega, and she did confirm that Sonic 3 and Knuckles would be widescreen as well. Even though they didn't show it, when they showed Sonic 3, it was the original version, right? And they specified that. So clearly that's not ready yet. It's coming out in 2022. That should be worth noting.
That's a long delay for a collection of games that are 20 years old.
It's especially kind of weird.
Yeah. Especially for an anniversary collection. Like you're missing the anniversary.
To miss the anniversary for an anniversary collection. And, like, okay, so I don't want to be too hard on game delays because of COVID, right? That just
right.
Yeah.
But a collection of classic games for the anniversary, to me, that just kind of comes down to poor planning on Sega's part. Like, it feels like this might have been a very last minute, like...
Yeah.
Like, we need another announcement for this.
Yeah.
It comes across as that they considered it a very low priority. Now, obviously I don't know if that really is the case, but it comes across that way, which is disappointing.
Yeah.
Nintendo was brave enough to just dump some ROMs,
Yeah.
That's courage.
Yeah.
I want to spotlight on the widescreen for a second. I'll say that old Sonic games work a lot better in widescreen because a common complaint about Sonic is, I run and I just run into something because you can't see it.
Yeah.
So this fixes a lot of those issues and I think makes them better games.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly
agree 100%.
Like, and so I guess we should touch on this. The widescreen versions on mobile, those are the Taxman versions, right? Christian Whitehead, he made Sonic Mania. I think because these are widescreen, there's decent reason to believe that this is those versions and that he's working on this collection. We don't know yet, though. They've not confirmed one way or another.
My hope is that the versions that are on this collection are the Taxman and Stealth remaster versions.
Yeah.
Especially, Sonic CD is almost definitely that. That has been on consoles before. But Sonic 1 and 2 mobile have a lot of extra features and content that really make them, like, really the definitive versions of those two games, and they've never been available officially off of mobile. So I know for me, like, the only thing that I want out of this collection is that it's those versions. If it's those versions, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
If it's not, I'll be scratching my head because doesn't make any sense.
I have a question. Since Sonic CD has been on consoles before, was that ever the widescreen version or was it not?
It was widescreen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
Sonic CD.
Sonic CD is the one that's been on console. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Sonic CD was the first one that Taxman and Stealth did for Sega, and it features widescreen playable tales and both soundtracks actually.
Wow.
You could toggle between the two of them.
That's great.
And then for anyone who doesn't know, the mobile Sonic 1 and 2 similarly widescreen, they all feature Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles playable along with super versions of them. The Sonic 1 version features a toggleable extra special stage that lets you get a 7th Chaos Emerald to play as a super version of the character in-game. They all have time attack modes. They all have improved debug modes that include a lot of extra elements that were not in the original games. And then Sonic 2 features full online multiplayer for the whole game. And it features the infamous Hidden Palace Zone is included in there as well. And I want to say... Well, I know there's a few things that they did with that didn't quite... they didn't get to implement, so I'm curious if maybe some of those might make it to this version. But yeah, they're very widely considered to be like the definitive versions of those games.
Does one add Spin Dash?
One has spin dash as an option. Yeah.
Oh, do you think? By the way, do you think they'll add that move from Mania?
Drop dash.
dash?
Well, it's worth mentioning that the M2 versions of Sonic 1 and 2 and Sega Ages do feature drop dash as an option.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So it's very possible. And then that's also worth mentioning to see if it's in Sonic 3, because as some people may be aware, prototype of Sonic 3 showed up last year, and it turns out that the drop dash actually originates from that.
Oh wow,
That's amazing.
I did not know that.
So it would be very interesting to see that reintroduced as an option of some kind.
And that's, I mean, all that stuff is crazy, right? Like,
Yeah.
like it's worth
Oh,
noting.
yeah.
Like, imagine if they went back to Mario 3 and added moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that there's something that's very, very cool about the willingness to play with your classics, right?
Yeah. And now,
The
if
closest
we're
we've
lucky,
gotten to that is 3D World with some new moves there.
if
Yeah.
we're lucky enough to get a Taxman and Stealth Sonic 3 and Knuckles, they did do a point, or what do you call it, what's the phrase, a proof of concept of it. And one of the things that was in that proof of concept that I thought was kind of fascinating was the ability to make your own blue sphere stages.
Oh, that is neat, actually.
Yeah. Now, obviously, that never made it to production. It's unclear if it
Yeah.
would ever make it to production, but it would be really cool if they were finally able to do 3 and Knuckles with that level of detail. Obviously, the big question is the soundtrack.
Yeah, that's the big thing. It's rumored that's what's been holding it up for so long, right? So
Yeah.
really curious to see what they do with that soundtrack. I'm excited for. I'm excited for this announcement. I guess I just wish it was a little bit sooner. I guess that's my big thing
Yeah.
there. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of gonna forget about it for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I also
I
think
hope-
it's a little unfortunate that it only features 1, 2, 3, and K and CD. I don't know why, at the very least, they couldn't have put, like, Chaotix in there, or, like, maybe, like, a few of the Game Gear games or something. It's a very, like... We've had a lot of Sonic collections, right? There's been a Sonic Mega collection. There's been the Sonic games featured on the various Sega Genesis collections over the years. And, like, they have been pretty great examples of high-value collections. Mania... Or, sorry, not Mania. Mega Collection Plus, has all the Game Gear stuff. Not all of it, but it has most of the Game Gear stuff. It has all the Genesis stuff. It even has some bonus games. It has, like, a full gallery. All of that. Great museum content and stuff. And then you have Gems Collection, which featured, Sonic the Fighters and Sonic R and stuff like that. So I don't know what the scale of this project is. It just feels, based on what they've shared, it just feels like such an afterthought, and it's disappointing to me as someone who's primarily a fan of 2D Sonic games that it seems to be such an afterthought. But I'm hopeful, once more details are out, maybe.
Yeah.
I guess my hope for this thing is, even if, as much as I would like to feature more, as much as, like Knuckles, Chaotix and whatever, right?
Yeah.
If at a minimum this does give me the definitive versions of these games, though, these 5 games, right? I think to me that's good enough, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Especially like being able to play those on my Switch, right?
Yeah.
Or any console, really. It's just something with buttons, right?
Yeah.
That to me is good enough. So I don't. My expectations are not too high. I really hope Sega can meet just that minimum.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, all I'm really looking for is Sonic 1 and 2 remastered to be those versions. And if they manage to not do that, then I really I don't.
Then it's hard
understand.
to care about this. Yeah,
Yeah,
and also it's just mind-boggling too.
Yeah,
right?
if it's just 4 Genesis ROM or 3 Genesis ROMs, 1 Sega CD-ROM, that would be very disappointing.
If they just take Sonic 1 and make it widescreen and don't base anything else on those other versions, that is so extremely missing the point that it's not even funny.
But to be fair, Sega's no stranger to missing the point with Sonic.
Yep.
Let's talk about the last announcement on this show.
Yes.
Speaking of missing the point,
Speaking of missing the point, so I think this is the one game we all kind of expected to see, much like Dragon Quest, right?
Yeah.
Except I think with Dragon Quest, some of us did expect just a logo because I think most people thought Dragon Quest 12 is a couple years away, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we all expected the next mainline Sonic game to be this year. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I thought this was the
yeah.
focus of the show.
Right?
Yeah.
This was going to be the big blowout. We haven't seen Sonic, mainline Sonic for 4 years now, right?
Wow.
Sonic Forces was 2017. Here's something to think about. This game has roughly been in development since Breath of the Wild 2 has. Like, roughly the same time frame.
So we'll have to compare them on the exact same level.
I was about to say, they have very similar aspirations, so...
Yeah, okay. Well, so before we talk about rumors, let's just talk about what we saw, right? And that was nothing.
Sonic ran in a forest, and there was a
think
weird
it
symbol
was-
shown.
Yeah.
I think it was so funny that the day before they had their teaser thing, right? And there was that
Yeah.
new render of Sonic, and people were,
They were
microscope
like, yeah.
so into this thing. Like, what could this hint at? It turns out that was basically the entire
That
thing.
was it. Like,
Yeah.
that
was
teaser
it.
would have been good enough, like, from the day before, because that's what we got, right? We saw,
Yeah.
like, a vague picture of a new render of Sonic. We saw him running through the forest for, like, 1.5 seconds, and it made this completely nonsensical logo, right?
Yeah.
Like, what does that logo invoke anything in you?
It
No.
looked
It is-
kind of like a Norse mythology thing.
I know some people were like, "Does that say up? Does that say zap?" Like,
I saw Zap for a while, yeah.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
kind of like
I don't know.
it isn't the good kind of intrigue. It's the
Why
What?
did you bother? Right?
Yeah,
It's
like-
just literally, it was just like a why did you even bother with this presentation kind of thing, you know?
I mean,
Yeah.
in the spirit of continuing to make very fair comparisons, compare the intrigue of the Breath of the Wild 2 reveal to this one, right? Like,
Yeah.
like that's one where it's like, okay, what's happening? Where this one's like,
Yeah.
what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
but you're
I
thinking
wasn't-
that about the team making the game, not the game itself.
Honestly, all I was expecting for a reveal for the new 3D Sonic was just some sort of basic trailer,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
something. The
Something
teaser
like-
that they gave.
Show
was
me the
not even a
concept.
teaser.
I mean, even Forces' teaser 5 years ago, in the 2016 anniversary thing, right? Even that was more substantial than what we got here, right?
Yeah.
Like this was just nothing. And to the point where it's like, if I was Sega, I would not talk about Sonic at all until I was ready to show this game.
Yeah.
Just personally.
Yeah.
You know? Because
Also-
it's been a long time. You know?
If you don't have a trailer in 4 years, what are you doing?
What are you doing? Obviously, we should
Yeah.
still give some credence. COVID. I think this one being
I can't give him
2022
4 years for COVID.
Well, no, but
Sure.
I do think this one being 20, it was obviously going to target 2021, right? And so I
100%.
think this game slipping into next year is more fair, you know.
But
But also a 5-year development time cycle for Sonic is bananas, right?
Well, pardon me, but there wasn't any significance to the day of the Sonic Central, right?
No,
Yeah.
this was not on the anniversary. This was just a random day. This did not have to be today. This could have been in 2 months, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why they did it this way. Now maybe they want to do something for Keeley. Maybe that's why they're not showing it. I think the more likely answer is they just don't have anything to show yet, right?
Yeah.
Who knows?
They
I
did
don't know.
mention that this is the first Sonic Central, so they are going to be having more of
Okay.
these,
Okay.
but
So
it's
they're doing
still-
more. But
it's yeah.
But to me, it comes across as like, why are you wasting our time doing multiple of these things, right? Like, especially for the first showing. The first showing should give me reason to look forward to the next ones, right? Whereas now I'm
Yeah.
just like, do I care enough to watch any more of these presentations? Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, last year I think we learned that, like, that Ubisoft Presents, right? Forward, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That they barely had enough to justify 2 events in a year. And that's the whole publisher of Ubisoft.
Yeah.
Let alone Sonic the Hedgehog. You know,
Yeah.
like...
Yeah.
So I don't think Sonic can keep me interested in multiple presentations throughout
No.
this year. You know, it's just it'll be very hard for me to care, honestly. But okay,
I-
like there's nothing to say about this game, right?
Yep.
But-
Outside of.
But so we have
We
rumors.
talked about how we deliver hard facts on this podcast
Yeah.
15
Yeah.
minutes ago.
hard
So here's a
facts
rumor.
right here. So let me preface with, so none of this is confirmed, right? But
Yep.
there's enough that matches up that makes this pretty likely, right? Am I off
Yeah.
base here? Okay.
It seems plausible.
Yeah, seems plausible enough. So basically, we got nothing on this, right? But then someone, correct me if I'm wrong. So someone data mined like the assets or something, right? Or the website or something.
So something on something in the PR or on a website
Okay.
mentioned the new Sonic game as being titled Sonic Rangers.
Okay. Yeah.
And following that, people dug up some old 4chan posts from like January, I think, of this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
January
People who-
6th. Yeah.
From people who
Big day.
I think there were two, right? From people who claimed that they had play tested a game called Sonic Rangers for Sega and gave details about it.
Yes. And so
And
let's
so-
dive into those details. So I mean, it could be the name was a coincidence, but Sonic Rangers is not a name I saw many people or anyone guessing, right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Well-
I that in of itself gives it a pretty good amount of credence in my view.
And the other thing that it mentions is that Sonic has a new ability called the spin cycle, where he traces a line behind him, and if you make a circle with that trace, it kills the enemies inside the circle, which
Yep.
is literally the one thing he does in that trailer.
And
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
the main mechanic in Pokemon Rangers, where you circle the Pokemon in circle.
Very true.
Oh, yeah,
They
it's all
do
coming
die at
together.
the end of it. You're correct.
All comes full circle.
So, let's get to the big thing. This is, so according to the Fortune Rumor, this is an open world game. They are making goddamn Sonic of the Wild. Okay?
Yeah.
So this is an open world adventure game, heavy inspiration from Breath of the Wild. They say that it has puzzles, it has challenges, there's XP and a skill tree, which is not in Breath of the Wild, but you know, whatever.
Yep.
The skill tree gives you abilities like the aforementioned spin cycle, which lets you trace a circle and kill
I'm
everything
sorry,
inside.
but Spin Cycle is so funny to me because it's a washing machine.
I'm just thinking of washing
Washing
machine.
machine.
Yeah. Hey, your washing machine more powerful than you think.
Yeah.
The lock-on attack is back. And so there's bosses throughout the open world. They give you orbs. If you get enough orbs, if you get enough orbs, you get to go to a portal, and this gives you kind of unleashed daytime level stages, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so they have that kind of boost Sonic in there, but they're segmented into specific levels. I guess would be the equivalent to Breath of the Wild shrines, right?
Yeah, or
to-
dungeons, I guess you could say,
Right.
for Sonic.
Well, I guess I guess the reason I mentioned the shrines is because I'm assuming there's many of these, right? Like or at least a
Well,
decent chunk, right?
The rumor specified that you would play one of these levels, and if you
Uh-huh.
completed the level fast enough, you would get a Chaos Emerald. So my interpretation
Oh,
was
so
that
there's
there would be
seven of them. Okay, okay, that's a lot less than I was thinking. All right, so there's
Yeah.
7 of them probably,
and you
all
get the orbs from beating the bosses that are apparently scattered around the overworld, which also gave me a Shadow of the Colossus vibe.
Exactly the comparison they were going for.
No
Yeah.
one can say that this Sonic game is not ambitious. All right, this is an
True.
ambitious Sonic game.
And I almost get where they were coming from, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because a big problem HD Sonic has had is it's very, very hard to make daytime levels, enough of them to have a substantial playtime,
Yeah,
right?
True.
Yeah.
Like Werehog, I don't think happened because they thought the Werehog was great. I think that was literally we need to make more levels, reuse assets, and that take longer, right? And I think that continues on to where Forces, they didn't try that, and it was 2 hours long. So I guess the thought is we'll make a normal Link Sonic game and stick it in an open world.
Yeah.
Now we can talk about all the problems that entails, even if you get where their logic is coming from.
The thing is, they solved this problem years ago with Adventure. You just have different characters and slightly change the levels.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess.
it is worth mentioning that at least in these builds that were supposedly played, that there was no sign of anyone besides Sonic.
Yeah, I mean,
They all
I
died
would, I
100
would
years ago.
highly doubt that there's more playable characters. The scope of this game seems too much for Sonic to have
Yeah.
multiple
No
playable
Sonic
characters with
friends.
them. Yeah, I doubt that there's any friends. They might show up in like the individual stages or whatever, but I doubt they're playable in any way, right?
Now, it is very hard to make a good open world as is.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's even harder to make one where you have a good jump. Right? Like,
Yep.
Nintendo knows how to make a fucking 3D platformer. And Mario Odyssey, that took a while from them, and it was a sandbox, because they knew we can't let this get out of hand. Meanwhile, Sega's trying to make this on a Breath of the Wild scale. Like, I mean, good luck. You know, it's very hard to do.
Luck, Sonic.
Well, I should say, it was compared to Breath of the Wild, but we don't actually have an idea of what the actual scale of the open world is.
You are right.
Sure, no, that's true. But I do think it's undeniable, even just from the details, that like they clearly like that was the influence point, though, right? Like they looked at Breath of the Wild and were like, "We want to do that for Sonic," right?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a point of influence. I think the general structure is interesting.
Sure.
The idea that you go through this overworld and you deal with all kinds of like mini enemy encounters and like puzzles and stuff, and you kind of get stronger in the overworld, and then you take on these bosses essentially to open up the main like challenges of the game.
Yeah.
But it sounds ambitious. I don't know if they can pull it off. That's really it's what it comes down to. I just don't know if they can pull it off.
I want to get down to the core question here. And I feel bad because it's so easy to dump on Sonic, but to be fair, they don't give us much reason not to, right? Do you legitimately have any faith in Sonic Team to pull this off? Like, any?
I have a shimmer for aspects of this game, but not the game as a whole.
Okay.
I mean, I think it could have a very good case of being an Unleashed thing of... Like, people seem positive about the traditional Sonic levels in the playtest.
Yeah, people really like those ones.
Unleashed daytime stages are great, but the rest of the game is bad, right?
Yeah,
and
and a very similar tact was seemingly in this person's impressions, right?
Yeah. They said that it seemed also... I mean, they did take care to mention that it seemed early and rough.
Yeah,
and it seemed like the open world aspect in particular had not been extremely developed yet. I know they mentioned like button mashy combat and stuff. When I hear that, I'm just like, why is there combat?
But I think to their credence, these could be like just because it's like very early in development. We know this game's not coming till next holiday. I think we can safely say that means next holiday, not just next year, right? Next holiday.
Sure.
They have a lot of time
honestly,
still.
Yeah, honestly, it could be holiday. Maybe not. I don't know. I didn't really think too much about that, actually.
I just think like
Sonic
7 good Sonic levels and a really bland open world. So, like, if you want to fight to get to, like, those 7 fun levels, like, they'll be there.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing I'll say is, similar to Dupe's take on Pokemon Legends, I respect just the effort, you know?
Yeah.
Like, Forces... Sorry to those that like it out there, however many of you. The reason that, like, Forces was sort of what broke my Sonic fever, right? Of just like I just stopped caring, and it's because there wasn't even like Sonic would at least swing, right? They would miss wildly, but like 06 is an ambitious game while being a mess, right?
Yeah.
If you're both bad and ambitious, why am I here?
Yeah.
Right.
And that was Forces, right? Where Forces was just like it was just such a nothing game. You just could not care about it in any way.
And so like at least I the first time they show this gameplay, I will be there curious. You know?
Yeah. Same here.
Now this is purely off the word of leakers. If it was just what we saw in that trailer, I cannot give less of a shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Which I think is a failure on their part.
Assuming that this information is legitimate, I am curious. If they show this thing and it's something completely different, then whatever. But
yeah, we'll see how it looks then.
I'm curious.
It gets me intrigued, right? I went into this being like, I do not care about Sonic, and now I'm like, I want to see this game, right? Even if it's a disaster, I want to see this game.
It will be an interesting disaster, you know, which is something.
there's something we haven't discussed yet with an open world. Sonic goes very fast. So the open world needs to be very big.
Yes.
To make it not seem very small, which means they either need to fill it with things or just have it be a bunch of empty fields.
Or they need to make you feel like you're moving quickly but aren't actually moving.
They're just moving really slowly.
Yeah.
It's just a million loop-de-loops. So
you know,
like,
maybe everyone is
you're
fast in this one. You know, so it's just if everyone's fast, is anyone fast? Think about it.
Well, because I was thinking about Sonic. Sorry, but like it's this thing that's like there's a lot of games that are parkour-y, right? And it's weird that like Sonic is sort of the originator of that, right? Like Sonic is about going somewhere quickly, effectively, in a way that looks interesting, right? And like I think that there's some nugget in there if you could make a playground where that feels fun just to move around, right?
Yeah.
But that's a very difficult task.
I just don't know. Sonic Team are the people that do that, though. I guess is what it all
Yeah.
comes back to, though. Like I don't know if I can trust Sonic Team to make a game that works out like this. Maybe they could, though. Maybe, who knows?
I would love to eat crow.
And I'm gonna give them credit for trying. Like I really will.
Yeah.
I'm glad that this is not just another Generations Forces style game.
I'm glad it's a new thing.
To me, that was actually. To me, another game in the style of Generation Forces was actually the worst case scenario for this game. You know, I could not care less about that anymore. You know, it just does not appeal to me in any way, and it's boring. It's just boring.
That was my fear as well, is that it would just be another one that's like those, and I think at this point, like I'm very good. I'm ready for something else.
Well. It's that thing that's like I looked it up because I was curious, and like next year if it comes out on holiday, there will be as much time between Generations and Rangers, whatever it's called, as between Sonic Adventure and Generations.
Wow.
Right? Like this has been the template for as long as any other, you know? And so I think it's good that there's a reinvention.
I have a question. Since this game supposedly has RPG elements, do we expect things like towns and side quests?
I think it'll be the most.
Right?
Well, would you think it has RPG elements in the same way that like Spider-Man has RPG?
Well, I mean, to me, to be honest, and I don't want to make it sound like Spider-Man is as bad as Sonic, but a lot of it reminded me of Spider-Man, like what Spider-Man is like, right? Like Spider-Man's a big open world. With that's focused on movement, has Ubisoft towers, right? It reminds me. It kind of gives me vibes of Spider-Man, and so I don't like.
But what's the one thing that they had in Spider-Man? Great locomotion. You know, like moving around was great.
Yes.
You know, so if you make that work for Sonic,
if you make that work for Sonic, that does a lot for it inherently. I think, right? Yeah. So I think that's what they should look at, right? Is Spider-Man for this game, but
what a sentence. Do you think you would have said that a week ago?
God, no. But I am interested to see how this plays out. Oh, can we talk about the funniest aspect of this rumor, though?
Well, how about
So, apparently, there are little, like, Korok-esque things hidden throughout the world, right?
Yeah.
And the leaker describes them as, like, they start following you after, and they're just annoying pieces of shit. That is... so funny. Like that is taking Sonic Friends to a new level. You know? That's incredible. That is just incredible.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a very Sonic thing too, where like all of them just follow you.
Yeah, I think that's
the most Sonic thing imaginable to me.
It's like, imagine if like, I mean, if there was like 50 nabbies that followed you in Ocarina of Time, and all happened like separately.
Hey Sonic, hey Sonic, hey Sonic.
Like it'd be very, very funny.
Well, when do you guys think we'll see this game?
Oh, God.
Maybe like September we'll see something. I don't know.
Jeff's got it at the Game Awards. Jeff's gonna act the most excited he's ever been for a video game to show this off at the TV.
I mean, Sega is at E3 this year. Maybe they did this teaser as like a hey, you know, we're gonna show more soon. But I don't know.
Really quick,
what else? A good E3 showing.
I guess what else
Sega
is
sort
Sega
of
gonna show at E3?
like they announced Lost Judgment and this game weeks before E3.
Yeah.
Which is and those are the two franchises right now
Yeah.
that are getting entries. So, like, you know, I guess the thought is we'll just get. I mean, you know, I don't think Lost Judgment or this teaser would have gotten any press at E3, so maybe the right call. We wouldn't be talking about this otherwise, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
You know.
Well,
Yeah.
that's enough about Sonic.
Yeah.
That's enough for this episode. I think we had a pretty good episode. We want to thank you for listening. You can find us on the Nintendo Era Discord. We're also on, so we're on pretty much every podcast service you could find, right? Through iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, right? We you get us to
Yep.
Stitcher. We also post episodes on YouTube. We have our website where we also do blog posts and stuff. What's the domain for that again?
That is nintendoera.wordpress.com.
Yeah, so be sure to check that out. Otherwise, we're here every Friday. We want to thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. We're almost to
Yeah.
E3.
And thank you, Splendor, for
Yes.
hanging out with us.
no
Yeah,
problem.
thank you so much.
Fun time.
Bye bye.
Peace.
Bye bye.